All right. Welcome, everybody, to Top of Mind with Anne and Rachel. Rachel is going to be joining us shortly, it appears, but she will be here in just a few minutes. We'll start out with introducing myself and Kristi. So, for anybody who doesn't know me, my name is Anne Krupke. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a senior solution architect on the Fast Track team at Microsoft. I am a white woman with brown and purple hair, which is pulled up in a bun today, and I'm wearing a blue t-shirt. I've got my virtual Microsoft D365 background behind me. Joining us today is Kristi Slininger from the finance product team. So Kristi, please feel free to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. I am the lead for the finance area. Really excited to be with you today. My pronouns are she, her. I'm wearing a pink shirt, female with my brown hair down today. And in my background is actually one of the bedrooms at our lake house. I'm enjoying the pine trees behind me.
It looks beautiful over there.
Yeah.
Um, and it looks like I think we'll have Rachel in just a second, but I'll start by asking you our title question. Kristi, what is top of mind for you today?
Actually, the past couple weeks, our team has really been thinking about financial tags, which is actually a kind of a hot topic
Yeah.
recently. But in combination with that is Copilot. We've really been thinking more about how to use Copilot to actually create one of the next features that we're working on around financial tags, which is a defaulting engine. That'll be hopefully something that we can communicate here. We're just kind of researching and talking with customers right now and
Hmm.
dreaming. But again, we really want to use and evaluate how we can use Copilot to make the writing of those defaulting rules a lot easier. So an accounting manager could go in and quickly say a rule and just have the rule automatically written for them. Um, so that's something we've been dreaming about the last couple of weeks and working through and excited to talk to customers to get some feedback on.
Yeah, that's really cool. I was at Dynamics Con Live a few weeks ago in Arizona, and Copilot for sure was one of the big
Yep.
topics there. And I think of everything I've seen, I think that the big value add for Copilot is that it reduces the manual time, right? Like I think that's the
Mhm.
cool part, and I know finance people will love that because I feel like there's all these like little financial activities that you have to do all the time that are super manual.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
and it looks like we've got Rachel joining us.
I
So
finally made
Rachel,
it.
woo, welcome. Why don't you do your quick introduction?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks everyone. My name's Rachel Prophet. I am a white woman with long red hair that's pulled back today. I'm wearing a gray sweater with a hood, and I am in my office as usual with my epic sticker wall behind me.
Awesome. So we were just talking about what's top of mind for Kristi right now, and she said that they're looking at ways to incorporate Copilot in the financial areas, and she was talking a bit about financial tags and the evolution of that as well. We did have Eric Pegers on from the Fast Track team a few months ago to talk about financial tags, and he did
Yep.
actually just whip out a demo, which was very impressive
Awesome.
on such short notice. And I know that we have some of our listeners for sure were very interested in that feature.
Very cool. Yeah, Eric has been actually a good partner. Him and Rachel, actually, we've talked a lot about financial tags and kind of the vision and where we're going with it. And so it's been exciting. And it's actually really been exciting to talk to customers and just see the excitement um, to get this product or this new feature out the door. So that's cool that he was on talking about it.
Yeah. Um, what do you think the biggest kind of Apple? What do you see as being the biggest benefit of financial tags?
We see a lot of customers, I'll use the word abusing financial dimensions. Um, they right they want to track more detail in GL and totally
Hmm.
agree. It absolutely is a great requirement. They need it for analytics. They need it for even different processes like ledger settlement. But unfortunately, we just didn't have a great solution before financial tags. So a lot of customers were creating financial dimensions to track things like sales order numbers and purchase order numbers, which that was never the intention of a financial dimension. So again, while it's understandable,
Yeah.
that's really what we're trying to encourage customers to move away from, which is we've got this great alternative. Financial dimensions still have a time and a place. Absolutely. They're not
Mhm.
ever going to go away, but this just gives you so much more flexibility because there's no rules around it. There's no structure around it. It just lets you, put in whatever. I call it a marriage between a dimension and a description. It's really the best way I can describe a tag.
Sure. Mhm.
Just it kind of brings the best of both worlds together, where you can still do all of your reporting and analysis on the tag values, just like a dimension, without all the overhead, without the dimension sets behind it. So again, I think that's what's really speaking to our customers is that, hey, this is really just like a financial dimension, but I don't have all the extra junk to go with it. I don't have to add validation rules and account structures and things like that.
Yeah.
So it just really is a powerful tool, I think, that customers have been waiting for a long time.
Now, you mentioned ledger settlements.
Yeah.
I'm guessing maybe some of our viewers may not be familiar with ledger settlements at all.
Yeah. Anne's like, yes,
Right.
me.
Anne's like
Yeah.
raising her hand. Do you maybe want to like explain like what are ledger settlements and kind of
Yeah.
like talk about like how do we envision like tags playing into that in the future?
Absolutely. Yeah. So ledger settlement, think of it, it's a reconciliation tool is what it is. But from a general ledger perspective, so essentially what customers will do is they will take a main account in their chart of accounts that's typically a clearing account like AR, AP, an accrual account, a deferral account, any like a loan account, any account where you have a balance that goes in and eventually needs to come out. So basically, what customers will do with ledger settlement, and the purpose of it is to match up those debits and the credits together. So if I have an invoice that comes into accounts payable for $100 and then I pay that invoice, so I have, first the credit for that vendor invoice and then the debit when the payment comes out, those net to zero. So really those two debit and credit transactions no longer impact the balance of accounts payable. So
Mhm.
ledger settlement is a way to flag those transactions and reconcile them together to say these are complete. They reconcile, they're no longer part of the balance of my accounts payable account or my loan account or my accrual account. Um, so think of it kind of like AR and AP settlement, where you're settling the invoice and the payment together, but from the
Mhm.
accounting side of the world, where you're
Okay.
reconciling and matching the debit and the credit together
So that's
to
where having a financial tag that lets you do that
yes.
very quickly is of value.
Yeah, so where tags really come in, and this is one of the biggest scenarios we saw customers using dimensions for, is tracking that sales order number and purchase order number. They actually were putting the purchase order number on the invoice and on the payment, and then they just use it as match criteria. So with the financial tags, you can use the tag value in ledger settlement to match them manually. We also did add it to the automated rules that we have now for ledger settlement. So you can define a rule that even says, go to tag number 1, which is my purchase order number. Anytime the values of those match, try to match the debits and the credits together. So the two combined are going to be really powerful on the ledger settlement automation side of the world. And then, of course, people then can focus on the exceptions.
Mhm.
Now, I'd be curious to get your perspective on like where do we automate versus where do we bring co-pilots in with things like ledger settlements and
Yeah.
like these tedious month-end tasks that accountants have to do. Like, so
Yep.
like, what's your 2 cents on it?
So it is so interesting you ask this question because this is something as PMs we've been bantering around a lot on this exact question. Because we really, one of our other themes that we're working on is continuous close. We want to get better with every task, whether it's core finance or costing or inventory. We want to get better in general with any process that has to run at the end of a period. And so we've been trying to think about how do we again automate versus use Copilot, and some of them still come back a lot of times to automation, where it's really more of just kicking off a process based on a state of another process potentially. Um, where you really don't need Copilot to do that. You just need to say when, when this task, which I'm dependent on, is complete, automatically start the next task. That's more
So
automation.
I'm curious though, because I
Yeah.
mean, obviously I'm not a heavy finance person, but
Mm-hmm.
I've definitely worked with accountants, but I can even see some parallels. Like we have automation in master planning, right? That says,
Mm-hmm.
hey, you can just run planning and then automatically create the orders, right? Like automatically firm them. And you know how many people don't do that? Like most of them,
Yeah.
because
Yep.
they don't trust it. And I feel like
Yes.
at least some of the accountants I've met, like there's this I need to know, understand, and verify everything. And do you see that kind of perspective as a challenge for
Yes.
auto? Yeah, okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. And this is where we've always struggled with, like we introduced a financial period close workspace. Well,
Right.
gosh, this is probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, even already. The problem is people want it automated, but okay, how do I know the task before, which I'm dependent on, is really complete? Because of exactly what you're saying, Anne, which is how do I know that when the report generated, how do I know the person actually saw the report, validated the numbers on the report, and are okay with the report, like an
Right.
aging report? We don't have that knowledge until a user tells us that, yes, this is complete. So this is where, again, we're struggling a little bit with automation, is we really need still some user to tell us, yes, this is the state of that task. It's complete or it's in process. But I think once we get a better state model in place, which is really kind of where we want to go with all of our period end processes, is once we have that state model in place, then we can start to automate based on the state of a previous task that we're dependent on. And then kind of back to your question, Rachel, on like the co-pilot, where we really want to start to bring that in, maybe not so much on the automation side, but evaluating how can we make processes better. Um, One thing we're really talking about for co-pilot actually is a proactive reconciliation tool where we can say, here's a little window where you can tell the user can tell us which two pieces of data they want to match, right? Reconciliation is it's a big word, right? There's reconciliation of cross center company. There's reconciliation of subledgers to GL. There's reconciliation of X, Y, and Z. So it's really, having that user tell us, this is the two pieces of data I want to reconcile, but then using Copilot to tell us, okay, whenever those two pieces of data get out of sync, immediately notify us so that it's not at the end of the period that suddenly we're running this ginormous reconciliation report and I've got 20 problems. Where if we're proactive about it with Copilot, they can understand, and we really want to get Copilot to a point of even recommending how to fix it. Do we do an adjustment, or is it something that needs to be reversed? Or is there a pattern that we're seeing that maybe something is being entered incorrectly, or you're allowing a manual entry of an account that shouldn't be? So we're hoping to get that type of validation more with the Copilot side of the world, is evaluating the task itself and how effective we are with that. Yeah, automation versus Copilot is it's
Yeah.
No,
hard
it's a tough
difference.
one.
It's really tough.
And I think it's a challenge, like as we're all kind of learning about these I think everyone wants to get on this Copilot bandwagon, but it's like, and I think we've all wanted to be on this automation bandwagon for a long time too. But I think it's like it has to be a hybrid, right? And it's like picking the right tool for the right problem.
Yes.
And finding the right solution. And I think, Anne, you said it well. It's like we have to have the trust, because like we've had the automation in master planning forever and ever, right? And to your point, Kristi, right? We've had this financial period close workspace for quite some time.
Yep.
But if we don't have the trust in the process, like how can we actually, let it do what it was designed to do? And I think like it's interesting. I think.
See, I feel like that is actually the value prop for Copilot. Like we talked to one of our customers about, he was like, well, what if you guys had a co-pilot for planning where I could say, why is it telling me to place this order? And it just says point blank, this is why, right? You have this much on hand and this is your coverage policy. So we told you to buy this much. And I think that that's, at least, you know, in my background with MRP, that is one of the reasons people don't trust us, because they don't think that it's easy to find those answers themselves. So having a co-pilot that can come in and say, all right, we did an automated thing, but like Kristi, you were saying, here's a pattern we're seeing, here's an anomaly, or just here's a way to do a quick inquiry with a user-friendly explanation of why something happened. Like, I think,
Yeah.
like,
I
I
think
mean,
there's
think
so much
about how
value
long
in
it
that.
takes to learn the ERP system. Like, if you could make that, like, demystify that, right? Like, forget about needing to know exactly all the parameters in a table that could impact something, and just like let the system figure that, let Copilot figure it out, and just give you something that you can, like, anybody could understand. Like, I think
Yep.
that's the value.
Well, it's like Power BI has like that, like ask a question right in the report feature, but it's almost like you need that ask a question in the ERP feature, and like let it tell me point blank in plain English, like why I see what I see, but then follow through with that with like, here's the documentation, or here's a suggestion on, to your point, Kristi, like, let me help you now go make a reversing entry, or let me help you go fix the main account so that it doesn't allow manual entry to prevent this from happening again, or, you know, whatever allowed that to happen in the first place, to your point, Anne, because so many people have no idea, like all these buttons and knobs that like make
Parameters.
this thing
Yeah.
work.
Yep.
Like we have so many parameters
parameters.
and buttons and knobs and controls. And it's hard. I mean, I think if we use your example, Anne, of like the planning, like there's probably 20 screens you have to go to understand why master planning suggested an order, right? And
Well,
like,
there's one that there's an 80% of the time screen that works, but like 20% of the time, yeah, it's more clicks than that.
but the same is true if you're looking at like an aging report and you're like, or you're looking at a trial balance and you see that anomaly, like you now have to go to 5-6 different places, and that's time consuming, that's hard.
Yep.
And if you could just ask the system in natural language and get that natural language response with the links to help me along the way, guide me to the right thing, like I think there's a super interesting value proposition there.
So I think I'm curious, Kristi, what challenges you see, if any, to being able to implement that kind of, like, just Copilot in general for finance. 'Cause I've got my own thoughts, but I'm really curious, as someone who's got to think about the mechanics of how you're going to do it, what challenges do you see?
Oh gosh, I'm going to be very honest. I personally have not done it yet. We have, you know, there's obviously a lot of challenges just on the technical side of the world too. Um, it's hard for me to talk to them, like I said, because I haven't actually gone down that path yet.
Sure.
My team is still kind of in the daydream stage of what we want to do, right? There is some work that's happening right now on credit and collections that actually is getting pretty far actually with Copilot. I think that'd be a better question for Jody if you want to have her on sometime to talk about, but I don't think I can answer really well, honestly, yet at this point in time.
That's fine.
I think in a month or two, that'll be another good question as we come around to looking at actually implementing this now into the different areas, especially, you know, reconciliation, defaulting rules for tags is another really big one. So we're getting there.
Yeah, I feel like the small use cases make the most sense. Like, for me, the challenge that I kind of see, or I think that we would see, would be just you have to be able to train the AI engine on how things do work. And do we have that information to give it, right? Like, I think that, like, there's so many things that happen in dynamics. And I mean, anybody who's like gone through our doc site knows how challenging it can be for you to manually find something. So sometimes I wonder, I mean, that's why we're doing the whole like one guidance thing, right? We're doing all this stuff we can to improve the quality of our documentation, but it's not like we have this, you know, how often I get emails like, hey, do you have any like documentation you can share? Like not what's publicly posted, but like that you can share with me. And I'm like, no, there's no secret document repository.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
so, but I think that that's where when you say like we're going to do a specific thing about like defaulting rules or credit and collections, if you make the scope very small instead of we're going to give you a co-pilot for all of finance, I think that's where you
Oh
can
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
overcome
yeah.
that hurdle about data.
Yeah, and I actually see a comment there from Jody. She can't wait for defaulting rules on tags. Me too. Yay. Yeah, I think with tags, with the defaulting rules, we can control it better. We know the tables, we know the fields that we're going to be writing the rules on. So I think from an AI perspective, I don't want to say going to be easy, but it will be easier than a co-pilot type scenario where we're actually looking at customer data, right? That's where I totally agree. You're going to have that data in place to learn on. And that's an issue we've had since day one. You know, even back years ago when we were talking like cash flow forecasting, is we need customer data to evaluate, you know, the rules and the AI behind this. The defaulting rules engine though for tags, it set, you know, small set of tables, small set of fields. I think that's going to be a little bit easier for us. But I think, again, our goal with all these defaulting engines is we want this to be usable by an accounting manager. We do not want your IT team to have to be the one to create these rules. That kind of defeats the purpose. We've done wrong if that's what our result is. Because the accounting manager is the one that knows what they want to track. You know, just like with financial dimensions, the tags are exactly the same thing. So we're really we're actually starting to, like I said, talk to customers, daydream a little bit just around, you know, hey, if I go to a general journal and I enter a customer and I'm tracking a customer in tag 2, automatically default the customer name. You know, it should just do it. So yeah, we're pretty excited actually to get the defaulting rules out there. It'll be, I think, a very powerful tool for a lot of our customers.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I'm excited for it. And I know a lot of people are too. A lot of people, a lot of my customers have been asking about it. And I see Jody is there excited about it.
I know
Jody,
she's already
I know that
out.
you're a regular watcher. So if you've got questions,
Awesome.
and I know you're not shy. So if you've got questions, put them in.
Yes, please.
So we appreciate you coming and being one of our biggest fans. So
for sure.
Yep.
So before we got on the call, Kristi, you were telling me that you've been in this position at Microsoft for like 17 years, which first of all is amazing. And I know, you know, we kind of talked about how financial tags came out of this idea that people often misuse financial dimensions for a purpose that they're not meant for. And I'm curious, in your 17 years at Microsoft, what are some of the kind of biggest mistakes or gotchas that you've seen customers run into with how they use our finance system?
Oh gosh, there's a few. Like one voucher is another kind of popular topic, popular but kind of in a not a good way. We see customers using, because of the flexibility of journals, they sometimes enter things that really were not intended to be entered that way. And that's kind of what we see with the one voucher issue. It's kind of what we call it internally, which really is that you're really bringing together multiple transactions into a single transaction, which is always a bad thing. But at the same time, there's also situations where it really should be entered as a single voucher because it really is one transaction.
Could you give an example of both scenarios?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we see within the journals, it's actually pretty common for customers to bring in all of the transactions that are on a bank statement into a journal. And those transactions don't exist in the system yet. So It's a little more common maybe in Europe, but I think it's catching on a little bit more in the US, where you actually provide a list of vendors to your bank. They pay the vendors on your behalf. And then what happens is you bring those transactions in either through a bank statement or through some kind of just bank file. The problem is each payment is a separate transaction. If I'm paying vendor 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, you need to have 5 different vouchers. But because of limitations within the product, customers would bring that in as one transaction and offset all of them to a bank balance. And the reason for that is because the bank statement actually reflected the withdrawal of all 5 payments as one amount. Super valid business scenario. We actually just introduced a new feature to address that, where customers can now put in those payments as 5 separate vouchers, but still update the bank in summary. So
Do
that's
you know
an
what that's
example.
called off the top of your head?
Oh gosh, I can find the name of it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in
I
feature
think another
management.
common one is like netting between customers and
netting.
vendors.
Yeah, but netting is interesting though, because netting really should be one transaction. If you think about it, you're just really settling transactions together across a customer and a vendor that are the same party. So this is one thing, to kind of call out maybe a little bit, is the one voucher documentation that used to be out there. I actually just completely rewrote it because I do want to differentiate scenarios that are valid one voucher scenarios versus those that are not. Multiple payments, which should be separate vouchers, that is not a valid scenario to enter as a single voucher. And we created a feature to address that. And I'll find the
Is
name here
that
while I'm
single
talking.
voucher with multiple customer or vendor records?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
I was a
I'll
PM
put
on it.
that
I
as
should
a
know the
banner.
feature name, but I can't remember.
Yeah.
It's kind of bad, right?
Well, you do a lot of stuff, so that's okay. I can barely remember what I had for breakfast this morning,
Exactly.
so.
But
I
netting.
know a challenge I've heard a number of my customers have too, though, is like where they get a single payment from a customer that's like a big corporation, and it's actually multiple customer accounts, and they need to settle that against invoices that are in 4 or 5 different customer accounts, and that's a challenge as well. And I don't know that we have an answer, an easy answer for that.
That's even beyond one voucher, because the problem is now you're actually settling across customer records. That's another level beyond even the one voucher scenario. But yeah, netting is, in my mind, netting totally valid scenario to enter as a single voucher. Another one that we see a lot is a vendor invoice, where you create lines within the voucher to represent the lines of the invoice. So you've got one vendor, but you've got project 1, project 2, project 3. Totally valid scenario to use one voucher because it's one transaction, it's one invoice. But we have that issue with, if I've got multiple projects on there, I don't know how they equate to the lines of your invoice. So I think, so kind of back to the original question that you asked, Anne, is I think journals is really where interesting scenarios happen, because it is so flexible that sometimes we're like, gosh, I never even thought about a user entering something that way. It's like, oh, okay, we either got to like shut that down, or we got to support what they're doing. Which is it? Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? So the flexibility is great, but yet it presents challenges to us. That's for sure.
It's like you gotta poke the system, right? Make it impossible to do it wrong. But I definitely learned a lot of new things about finance today. I will say the one thing that I've always found crazy is that sometimes people just choose to short pay their vendors. Like, just you sent me an invoice and I'm just gonna pay what I want to pay. So kudos to all those accountants who deal with that stuff.
Well, there's certain industries that have cash discounts. Absolutely. And that's valid, but I always kind of find it interesting where customers like, I missed the cash discount date, but I'm going to still pay less the cash discount anyway. It's like, okay, I guess that's up to you, but.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Kristi. I think that's all the time we have, but it's been super fun, and I've learned a lot. I hope everybody who's joined us today has as well.
Yeah. Yep. Thanks everyone for joining us on Top of Mind. We'll see you next time.
Yeah. Thanks for
All right.
inviting
everyone.
me.
Bye.
Bye.